Bjarke Ingels dolazi iz Danske i pripada novoj generaciji arhitekata koja kombinuje preciznost sa jedne strane i eksperimentalnost i inovativne ideje sa druge. Sve sa velikom dozom humora i odgovornosti prema društvu i ekologiji. Big Studio baziran je u Kopenhagenu i predstavlja grupu od 85 arhitekata, dizajnera i stratega koji rade na polju arhitekture i urbanizma, kao i na istraživačkim i razvojnim projektima širom sveta. Gost Beograda jedan je od najznačajnijih arhitekata današnjice.
I'm lucky girl today because I'm here with three beautiful minds. The first one is Bjarke Ingels. Nice to meet you. And I read in the newspaper that you are voted for most creative person with in business with the Google, Facebook, Lady Gaga, and you know for them, and you like it.
Yeah, I mean, it's always nice to be in a category with Lady Gaga.
I want to talk about Azerbaijan. It was amazing. Look at that island you made. And can you tell me something about that buildings? It looks like waves, and they're, as I know, ecologic with the materials and everything.
Yeah, like well, essentially it all started that we did a building in Copenhagen that we called the Mountain, and it's like taking a parking building and then putting a lot of apartments on top, so the apartments turn into houses with gardens, so it's almost like having a suburban community on top of a big parking structure. And then a minister from Azerbaijan came to Copenhagen to visit our office, and he saw this building, and he loved the idea that you could make mountains out of architecture. So he asked us if we could redesign an island in Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan. And so that, you know, from the city they were afraid of developing it, because like if you would make a mediocre wall of high rises, you would ruin the view of the Caspian Sea. But if instead we could make a city where the silhouette of the skyline of the city would form the silhouettes of the 7 most significant mountains of Azerbaijan, then maybe it could be a beautiful development. And Azerbaijan is sometimes called the Alps of Central Asia, and actually one of their mountains, called Ilandak, is where Noah's Ark stranded after the flood, if you know the story about Noah and his ark.
Yeah.
So when the water began coming down, his boat got stuck on top of a mountain, and that's one of the mountains from Azerbaijan. So we were basically commissioned to make this like big urban development in the form of mountains, and then because the island was a desert, we made the mountains collect fresh water. We have this organic cleaning, so gradually, because of the urban development, the entire island is going to become green, and it's in a way the urban development is creating the nature around it.
Tell me about China. What do you think about China at all? Because you made a pavilion in Shanghai now for World Expo.
Yeah, I mean, I think China is a pretty interesting condition, because like it's this combination of being like completely the future and then completely like backwards at the same time. Because you can say like the Danish pavilion we designed is this sort of it's almost like this sort of loop made out of steel, and we made it with 3D programs, like incredibly sophisticated files that we submitted to the contractor. It would be like it's a building that's very difficult to build, but then the contractor, instead of cutting it out with robots or like with laser cutters or whatever, they printed all our 3D drawings out in 2D, and then there was like these women with white chalk drawing by hand on the steel, and then like another guy with a blowtorch would cut the steel by hand, and then they would put it together. So in a way it's like this sort of space age design built almost like you did like in the Middle Ages, but you know, it stands and it holds, but it's this sort of, you know, it looks totally like something that came out of a computer, but it's totally made by hand. Just a lot of hands.
A lot of hands, a lot of work.
A lot of Chinese hands.
Can you tell me about your comic books?
Yeah, because like essentially the main idea is that architecture, in many ways, is a sort of a collective effort. It's like you and me and like all humans essentially constantly redesigning the world and constantly refurbishing, let's say, the surface of our planet so it actually fits with the way we want to live. And that's why architecture is almost like one of the most sort of relevant issues to have an opinion about and to discuss, like, do our cities and buildings fit to the way we want to live? But quite often the public debate about architecture is just, you know, looking at the final result, like looking at an architectural object. Is it ugly? Is it beautiful? Does it look weird? Does it fit with the neighbor buildings? And I think this sort of typical example of the public debate about architecture is always coming up with names for new buildings. Like, is Foster's new tower in London, is it a gherkin or a sausage or a dildo? So we try to say that maybe it's more relevant to talk about all the different compromises and conflicts and concerns and demands that shape our buildings into what they are. So instead of just looking at the final building, we wanted to look at the process of how the buildings actually become the way they are, why our cities actually evolved the way they are. So we try to find a way of telling stories with architecture. So not just presenting a final result, but really explain the story of the design process. And we couldn't think of a better way to tell stories than comic books, because you actually have drawings and images and speech bubbles and text boxes to turn architecture into stories.